your ankle? Okay. All right. Mr. Lewis is here with Mr. Durst, also Mr. Chesnoff and Mr. DeGuerin are present. The people are represented. Counselor present for the DA's office, and questioning the witness is Deputy District Attorney Lisa Russell. And Dr. Landman-Reiner, our witness, has resumed the witness stand. I'll remind you that you remain under oath, and you may continue with your direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, so good afternoon. We are back here. We left off talking about who you would report to if you were to call in sick to a rotation.
Right.
And if you were to call in sick to rotation, what time would you call in?
As early as possible in the morning when they were there, so that might be between 7 and 8.
Would you call in between maybe 9 and 11?
No, because the day would have begun already, and you'd be interrupting them in the middle of their morning. And sometimes there was patient care work going on. I mean, sometimes it was more like classroom, but sometimes you were on a team taking care of patients, so you'd want to get to the word to them as early as possible because there was work to be done.
Yeah, that's understood. Going back to being at Albert Einstein Medical School, when you were there, did you interact much with the deans?
No. Perhaps not at all, but.
Would the school even care maybe that a student was missing a day of rotation because they were ill?
I can't speak for them.
Okay. And so I'm going to now present you with a hypothetical. I'm going to ask you some questions about it, okay? And here's the hypothetical. A fourth-year female medical student about to graduate is set to report to their first day of pediatric clinic rotation. And I want you to further assume that the medical student is interested in doing residency in pediatrics, potentially at this hospital. Do you understand this hypothetical?
Yes, I think I do.
Based on the culture at Einstein College of Medicine back in 1982, how sick would a fourth-year medical student have to be to call in sick that first day of that clinical rotation?
Well, for any clinical rotation, you in the culture of the time and the place, you would have to be quite sick to call in sick. I mean, not just a cold or a. You would get there if you possibly could.
I want you to further assume that this female student reported to the dean of the medical school that she had diarrhea, cramps, and a headache. Does that sound like the level of illness that would prevent an Einstein medical student in 1982 from going to her first day of her pediatric clinic?
No, not unless the diarrhea were really severe, where you couldn't, where you were dehydrated or, fainting or something.
Do you think you would call and say it that way?
I would not. And I would certainly not want to say, did you say stomach cramps?
Yes. Diarrhea, cramps, and a headache.
No, I would not mention cramps and a headache. It sounds far too menstrual. And the last thing you want to complain of is something to do with your menstrual periods, because you were trying hard to prove that your femaleness was an indifferent or possibly a positive attribute, and certainly you would never complain of period problems.
Did you find out that Kathie had disappeared?
I did at some point.
And when did you find that out?
I'm not sure when. By graduation, I mean, I I'm sure I knew, but I don't know when. Partly, we were split up in different rotations, and sometimes I wouldn't talk to hardly anyone in my class for quite some weeks sometimes.
But not just back in 1982, at some point in your life, did you find out that Kathleen Durst had disappeared?
Yes.
And did you find out at some point when that was?
I heard that it was in, I believe, February, in just a few months before graduation.
And so that was close to the time that she would have been finished with school.
Yes.
All those years, all that hard work, and she disappeared just before finishing school.
Yes.
No further questions.
Mr. Lewis, you may cross-examine the witness.
Thank
You're
you.
unmuted.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
I only have a few questions for you. Thank you for coming all of this way. I know, given our times and given your life, it's quite a sacrifice. You mentioned learning of Mrs. Durst's disappearance sometime after the fact. I want to ask you, do you recall when the last time you saw her was?
No, I don't.
Fair enough. Let me ask you on another line of questioning. Based on your, I guess you would call it more of a school friendship, you did not socialize or have any contact outside of school with Mrs. Durst?
None or almost none.
Understood. It was principally centered around your studies.
Yes, correct.
Are you aware that Kathie Durst had a relationship, and by relationship I don't mean anything romantic, with Dean Cook?
No.
Were you aware that with the help and counsel of Dean Cook, Mrs. Durst had to withdraw from some of her rotations?
No, I was not aware of that.
Let me ask you along the lines of, you have painted us a very clear picture of the times and the pride in which you and other female medical students shared back, I guess, pioneering to where you've gotten today. I want to talk a little bit about that area of questioning. Would you agree with me, Doctor, that assuming Kathie Durst did have this relationship with the dean, that it might make some sense that she would call the dean as opposed to someone that she had never had any contact with when she had a problem?
And could you clarify for me again, please, what relationship they had?
Well, I don't want to testify, I'm not the witness, but as on the lines that Ms. Russell asked you to assume, assuming that there was a relationship that's documented in both Dr. Cook's notes and memorandums of counseling and trying to help Mrs. Durst, assuming that relationship existed, would it make sense to you that Ms. Durst might feel more comfortable calling Dean Cook, who she has this relationship with, over someone else affiliated with the school or a clinic to talk about a personal problem?
Your Honor, I'm going to object relevance regarding personal problem. I think the issue is the absence.
Overruled. You may answer. Just in generally.
Would it make sense to you, given that relationship, she might call someone that she knew, had a relationship with?
Well, I can imagine on a personal level calling somebody she knew, but on a professional level, she would have had a responsibility to the team that she was going to see, and those, she would be affected. I mean, it would color her relationship to the team for the whole rest of the rotation if she didn't contact them.
Understood. If in that discussion with the dean, would it surprise you if the dean would in fact contact the rotation and make clear she was not going to make it there?
Well, it sounds like a going pretty far for a, for a student.
Understood. Does it make more sense to you, though, going that far, given the personal relationships you had with Dean Cook?
I don't know.
Fair enough. You remember discussing, I believe back on February the 4th of 2016, you had the pleasure of visiting with Deputy District Attorneys Lewin and Balian. Do you recall that phone conference?
On the phone?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Do you recall a gentleman by the name of Stanley White?
Yes,
And you knew Stanley White, is that correct?
I knew him.
And you are aware that Stanley White and Mrs. Durst were dating during the time she was in medical school?
I had not remembered that at the time that I spoke with Deputy District Attorney Lewin in 2016.
And in fairness to you, it's been almost 40 years ago. But as you've had time to reflect, you do recall that Stanley White was dating Mrs. Durst during that time?
It didn't occur to me, but when I said Kathie and I didn't have a social relationship outside of school, we didn't go out for a movie or have supper at each other's houses or call each other on the phone or things like that. But I believe I included her in the invitations for one Saturday afternoon event, which I remember because I had so few social events that I gave during those years that it really stands out. And I believe I included her. She lived in the same borough and yeah. So it's conceivable that that was the connection that I might remember between Kathie and
Stanley White.
Stanley.
Understood. And quite frankly, you have described Stanley White as a problematic guy.
Your Honor, this is going to be irrelevant but an offer of proof.
So, seems irrelevant.
I
Offer
will
proof.
happily speak to it, Your Honor. Exploring if you want me to, I can do it without a narrative,
Okay.
as Mr. Lewin is apt to do.
Yes, succinctly then.
The relevance being the extent of her knowledge of Kathie Durst and the things that she's described today. I'm asking her about a discrete set of circumstances that would illustrate her familiarity.
I would say, let's see, let's sustain the objection.
Well, let me leave it with this. You did not have a high opinion of Stanley White.
That's still irrelevant.
Sustain. That would be objection relevance, which is sustained. 4. All right, go ahead.
Now, last area, Doctor, you had described noticing a bruise, I think quite fair to you in your vernacular, hematoma or a bruising-like mark around the neck area of Kathie Durst.
Yes.
And do you recall time-wise the proximity of that to when she disappeared?
No.
So it's not that you're saying this happened, a week, 2 weeks or something before she disappeared.
I'm not saying that.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you, ma'am.
Is there redirect examination?
No, Your Honor, I have no further questions.
May this witness be excused?
No objection, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Doctor, you're excused. Thank you for your testimony. And thank you for your examination.
Thank you.
Mr. Bailey and the people may call their next witness.
Thank you. The people call Helen Bloch.
Please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly state that the testimony you're about to give and the cause now pending before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. Just pull your chair closer to the mic, please. Please state and spell your first and last name.
Helen Bloch, Helen Bloch.
Thank you.
Will you not speak from the lectern?
Your Honor, because I need my computer, it's, if I have my computer up there, I don't want it visible to the jury. So it puts
So
me in-
please amplify beyond your ordinary amplification.
I've always been told to be quieter, but okay.
No, this time I want you to add decibels. to this
I can do it. I can do it.
Can we vote on that?
Nope, that's the order.
All right, well, may I begin, Your Honor?
You may examine the witness.
Dr. Bloch, how do you feel about testifying today?
Okay.
Have you ever testified in court before?
I have never testified in court.
And can you tell me, I gave it away by calling you Dr. Bloch, but what do you do for a living? Excuse
I'm
me.
an emergency room doctor
And how long have you been in an emergency room position?
since 1985.
And can you tell me a little bit about your education?
Well, I did an undergraduate degree in Ohio at Antioch College, and then I went to medical school at Albert Einstein College of Medicine and graduated in 1983.
So because of this, I'm going to need you to use the microphone. Pull it up a little closer to your mouth and lean right into it.
Okay, sorry about that.
There you
And
go.
I think you'll be more audible that way, which we all appreciate.
And in graduating in 1982, was that from Einstein?
In 1983.
Oh, 83, excuse me. And when did you start at Einstein?
1978.
So normally medical school at Einstein is 4 years, is that right?
That's correct.
And with the 5th year, did you end up taking some time off during medical school?
I did. I took a year off after my second year.
And can you tell me in terms of your specialty, did you indicate what specialty you have?
I'm an emergency room doctor.
And are you still working as an emergency room doctor?
I still am.
And in terms of, without telling us specifically what hospital, et cetera, where do you work?
I work in the borough of Queens in New York City.
And doctor, you were scheduled to be a witness in this case, correct, when the pandemic started?
Yes,
And you ended up, we almost got you, but not quite, is that right?
right. I got a ticket to come, and then we canceled before I went.
So I want to ask you, when I say the name Kathie Durst, is that somebody that you know, a name you recognize?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell me how you recognize that name?
She was a classmate at Albert Einstein.
And did the two of you, you said that you started in 1978 and graduated in 83. Do you remember when you met Kathie Durst?
I don't remember exactly when.
Do you remember, was she in the class of 82 or the class of 83?
I think she was in the class of 82.
And in terms of your knowledge of Kathie, can you describe what she was like?
She was very bright, very nice, very polite, very sweet person.
And if I were to ask you, in terms of your relationship with Kathie compared to your relationship with other medical students?
We were casual friends. We weren't close friends, but we were casual friends.
And in terms of the age of the other students, did you and Kathie have in common that you were not straight out of college?
I was straight out of college.
Oh, my mistake. There's so many doctors that I'm balancing, I confuse the resumes. Can you tell me, doctor, in terms of your relationship with her, you said it was more casual. Did you see her outside of school at all?
Occasionally, she would do, I remember a couple of times we'd have tea together at my apartment on 94th Street. And we commuted together sometimes to Einstein from the Upper West Side.
And in terms of the amount of times that you would see her outside of school, how many times do you think that was?
Just a handful, couple, 2 or 3. We saw each other at school, cafeteria, that kind of.
Did you know Kathie to be married?
Yes,
Did you ever meet her husband?
I did not.
And did you know anything specific in terms of personal knowledge about their relationship?
I did not.
Is it fair to say that as an emergency room doctor, that you have some experience with patients who are victims of domestic violence?
Yes, I do.
And now you've been a physician, an ER doctor, pushing 40 years, is that right?
Almost.
And can you tell me, do you have any other experience other than as an ER physician involving issues of domestic violence?
I was a rape counselor in college, and I do see quite a lot of abused people in the emergency room, unfortunately.
And can you tell me, you started dealing with domestic violence and rape victims in college, that would have been more than 40 years ago, is that right?
Yes,
And you're still dealing with them at times today, is that right?
yes.
Can you tell me, is the way that patients of domestic violence are treated today, is it different than it was 40 years ago?
I think it's very different. It's taken much more seriously. There's social workers who are trained to help. I think 40 years ago there was much less resources for people, much less protections for people.
Did you ever, with respect to Kathie, did you ever observe Kathie to have any injuries?
Yes, I did.
And can you describe what you saw or noted?
This I remember so clearly in my mind. She came to it was in the cafeteria, and she was wearing huge dark sunglasses. There was little tears in her eyes when she took her sunglasses down, and she had a black eye.
And was the cafeteria, was it indoors or outdoors?
It was indoors.
And when she was wearing the sunglasses, was that, at the time, did that appear to be kind of a normal place where people would be wearing sunglasses inside?
No, and it was a big cue that something was wrong. You don't wear sunglasses inside.
And at the time that you saw the injury, can you describe as best you can what it looked like?
She just had a black eye. I'm pretty sure it's the left eye.
And in terms of your experience, did that look like some kind of medical condition, or did it look like a traumatic injury?
It looked like a traumatic injury.
And I'm not asking you what you knew then, because I assume you have a lot more knowledge now, is that correct?
I hope so.
So looking back and having that image in your mind of what it looked like, if I were to ask you, do you have an opinion as to what it appeared was the cause of that injury? And I don't mean specifically who did something or what it was, et cetera, but just what that injury appeared to be.
It seemed to me something that, especially with the dark glasses covering and protecting, that somebody had punched her.
And let me ask you, either then or now, have you dealt with women who are victims of domestic violence who have attempted to hide their injuries?
Yes, I have. It's very, very common. Hide their injuries and also hide who did it to them, and in fact deny any abuse at all.
And let me ask you something. For a young medical student at that time in the early 80s, and let me ask you, do you remember specifically what year this took place?
I'm not sure exactly of the year.
And if you were, can you give us a range?
81, 82.
So it wouldn't be, obviously would not be after February of 82, is that right?
I don't think so.
And in terms of looking back, is it your memory that it occurred like your first year, or does it appear to be after that? Any further, again, if you can't.
I don't remember exactly when.
So for a female medical student suffering an injury like that, and assuming, I want you to assume for a moment that that was an injury from a domestic violence incident, would there have been a hesitation just in terms of even professional consequence, or even what other medical students would have thought about someone who was a victim like that from reporting it?
I think
That's
so.
speculation, I object to speculation.
I think you need to lay out a foundation, and then you can ask
Okay.
it without be speculative.
Well, okay, I'll lay more of a,
Yes.
all right. Doctor, you indicated that you've been an ER physician for more than 40 years, correct?
Yes.
And can you tell me, how many domestic violence patients do you think you've seen or treated? And I want you to include also your history as a counselor in college.
Hundreds.
And have you, and it's a part of that treatment, do you have experience speaking to these women?
Yes, I do.
And have you also, pursuant to your responsibilities as an ER physician, have you read up on research and materials regarding the issues that these patients can have?
I don't know if I've read a lot of research.
Excuse me a second. No notice that she would be used as an expert witness.
Well, if that's an objection, it's
That's an objection.
overruled. You may continue, or you may ask the question.
Okay, so ma'am, based on all of your training and all of your experience and the fact that you were yourself a young medical student in the early 80s or late 70s, I want to ask you, do you think that there would have been a hesitation by a female medical student to report that her husband was physically abusing her?
That's speculation.
I think the one more aspect is the medical student aspect. You've covered the Domestic Violence Foundation for personal experience and
All right,
reading. But talk about the culture within the school itself. Otherwise, I'll sustain it.
Certainly, Ron. In terms of as a woman in the late 70s, early 80s, going to medical school, was it as it is today where we have a very high percentage of women in the field?
It was not a large percentage of women in my medical school class.
And back at that time, was there societal, even medical school pressure for women who were taking that route to prove that they were as tough or tougher than their male colleagues?
That's leading, suggestive.
She's Your Honor,
Leading and suggestive.
as an expert witness under the code, Your Honor, I can lead her, and I believe I've established her expertise. Also, for the court's awareness, this information was disclosed. Counsel is aware that we've asked these witnesses these questions.
Thank you for all that. I did overrule the objection.
I wanted to make sure that.
Okay, go ahead.
I think people back then would be less likely to report whether they were medical students or not. And certainly, people tried to work harder as women back then in medical school than they do now. I mean, I think everybody works hard, but I think they had to prove a little bit more, or I think a lot of us women felt that way at the time.
And Doctor, as a young female medical student, I want you to assume that somebody was at that time in a relationship where they were the victim of domestic violence. Based on your experience, would there be the possibility that that relationship could end up reflecting poorly, or at least not being of assistance as they pursued their medical careers?
I'm not sure about that, but possibly.
Can you tell me, if someone were a victim of domestic violence, is that going to be likely a help to them in terms of as they are trying to rise within the local medical community?
I'm not sure.
You indicated, one moment, you discussed the injury that you observed with respect to the sunglasses. Do you recall when you made that observation, who was there in addition to yourself?
There were a couple.
How many people were there?
There were a couple of people. I don't remember who they were or how many, but there were more than just me and Kathie at the table.
And was there a response when the other individuals saw Kathie's black eye?
What other people said is hearsay.
Right.
Your Honor, I haven't, first of all, there's no statement. Since there's no statement yet,
I'm
it
sorry,
can't be
it's
offered,
called-
the truth of the matter asserted. but I'm not going to be offering for the truth of the matter asserted. Their reaction to seeing it is what will be the relevant information.
That's hearsay.
Mr.
It
DeGuerin's objected on hearsay when there has not been a statement that's been offered yet.
You call, the question calls for hearsay.
Your Honor, the question calls for, I've not asked for a statement, I've merely asked at this point in time, what was the reaction? And then if the witness ends up indicating, which I believe she will, that certain statements were said in response to seeing the black eye, that is going to go to the actual response to seeing the injury. I'm not going to be bringing it in. There's no truth of the matter asserted.
Well, why is the response relevant?
The response is going to be relevant because, as an offer of proof, individuals seeing Kathie Durst with this black eye immediately understood, saw what it was, and were extremely concerned for her.
And that is relevant because?
It's relevant because it would appear that a group of medical students are all looking at Kathie Durst going, she's a victim of domestic violence. That would be why it's relevant.
So is that collective opinion? Is that
No, it wouldn't be collective opinion, Your Honor. They're also then going to,
Okay, well, we'll take it one step at a
Okay.
time, but I think you're going down a road to hearsay. So that particular question is not, so.
And it denies confrontation.
Pardon me?
It denies confrontation of somebody else's thoughts or reactions.
I don't think so, but that particular question is all rule as to that. And listen very carefully to the question and answer only the question.
Dr. Bloch, when the other individuals who were with you, when they saw the black eye that Kathie had, what was any of their responses?
That denies confrontation, it's hearsay.
I think it assumes a fact, not an evidence, actually, that the others saw it. Did you establish that?
Your Honor, I think the.
Go ahead, establish it.
You're all together, correct?
Yes.
Kathie ends up removing her sunglasses, and all of you see this, is that correct?
Yes.
What happened at that point in time?
And that calls for hearsay.
So without giving me any statements specifically, however they may have reacted without repeating any words. If they responded with words, tell me that, but don't tell me what their words are.
My objection, of course, Your Honor, is that the response is hearsay. Facial expressions, whatever happened, we can't
I'm sorry,
cross-examine it.
Okay, but Mr. DeGuerin, I think you know that's not hearsay, so overruled. Okay.
Your Honor,
Yes.
The next question, the people will be offering what they said because we will not be admitting it for the truth of the matter asserted.
Okay, I'll hear you out on that part, but go.
Okay.
You want to cut to the chase and explain to me, we can do it.
Okay, then do you want me to approach on this? The next question is going to be, what did they say when they saw the black eye? It will not be admitted for the truth of the matter asserted. It's their response, and their response is relevant for the reasons that I just indicated.
Okay, you did not give me, let's not approach. I think we can sort this out here. So you haven't given me I'm going to sustain the objection unless you give me a relevant purpose.
Okay, the relevant purpose is going to be that the people are alleging that Mr. Durst.
I'm sorry?
In front of the jury, I mean, that's the whole speaking.
Well, I'm being asked, I'm more than happy to do it at sidebar or here, wherever the court wants me to do it. The court just asked me to do it here, so I can do
Is
either
that
place.
what you want, Mr. DeGuerin? I only have recognized one lawyer per side.
Sidebar.
Yeah, let's go sidebar in the jury room. And just relax, ladies and gentlemen. There will be a minute or two. You can make small talk, but don't talk about the case. Stand and stretch if you like.
You're muted. You're unmuted.
ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have I told you recently how much I love the law? I love the law. Anyway. The objection is overruled. You may continue.
Thank you. So, do you remember where we were, Dr. Bloch?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so what I'm asking you is, can you tell me, when Kathie took off her glasses and the other individuals who were present with, when they saw that?
Voice up, can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
I know it's dramatic to have a low voice, but you need to project to the back of the room, even though you're facing the front of the room.
Will do. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
All right. But you can throw something. You can throw something at me, an orange or something, if I'm too quiet. And I'll... Not you guys. Not you guys. It won't be an orange. A little worried. Dr. Bloch, can you tell me when Kathie's sunglasses came off, what was the response from the other medical students who were there?
We all said, don't go back to him.
And by him, who were you referring to?
Her husband.
Now, did Kathie, at that point, did she in any way say, yes, my husband did this, or did she simply remain silent?
I don't remember if she said her husband did it, but she said that she's not staying with her husband, she's in a safe place. And we said, don't go back to him.
And, Doctor, is that the only time that you can remember that you saw what looked like injuries on Kathie related potentially to domestic violence?
Yes.
Knowing Kathie as you did, I would assume you've met a lot of different people in your lives, both personally and professionally. Given the relationship that you had with Kathie, do you think that in that relationship that Kathie would have confided in you if she were a victim of domestic violence?
Speculation, state of mind.
Your Honor,
Overruled.
thank you.
I can answer that?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
If he says overruled, you can
Oh,
answer.
I'm sorry, I'm a doctor, not a lawyer.
It's a lot harder what you do than what we do.
Maybe. It's really hard to tell. People of domestic violence don't often want to tell people specifics. And she was a relatively private person. She was friendly, but she was private. She didn't tell things about her past and her family to me.
So, because I don't know her, and you did, I'm asking you, based on your relationship with her, as best as you can analyze it, do you think that if Kathie Durst had been an ongoing victim of domestic violence involving her husband, that that's something she would have confided in you?
She may not have.
Did you ever talk to Kathie about the idea about becoming a doctor?
I don't recall, sir.
In terms of her attitude and demeanor, what kind of student did she seem to be?
I thought she was a good student. She was really wanted to be a doctor, if that was the previous question.
Yeah, and have you said at any point that Kathie appeared to be excited about becoming a doctor?
Yes.
And would that be your testimony?
Yes.
Can you tell me, how did you find out that Kathie had disappeared?
One of her friends had called me.
And I want to back up. You might have said this, but do you remember specifically the year that you were gone?
So I started in '78. So it was, so it was 80, 81.
And by 80, 81, do you know, for instance, when in 1980 versus when in 1981?
Well, I left in July and I came back in July.
So you would have been gone from July of 1980 to July of 1981.
Right.
And while you were gone, as best as you can recall, did you have contact with Kathie Durst?
I did not.
Do you recall how it was you heard about her disappearance?
Somebody called me, one of her friends, I don't remember the name, and told me she had disappeared.
And do you remember approximately when that would have been? In other words, did you still hear about it while you were in medical school? Had you already graduated?
It was before graduation.
And before graduation, you were class of '82 as well, correct?
Right. Well, no, I graduated in the class of '83.
Oh, you know what, I think I've messed it up twice now during this same exam. When was graduation at that time?
What month of the year?
Yes.
It was usually at the end of May, beginning of June.
And when you say it was before graduation, would that have been graduation for Kathie's class of '82 or your class of '83?
I'm not sure.
Is it fair to say that when Kathie disappeared, that was something that was pretty big news at Einstein?
I'm trying to think. You know, when you're in your 4th year of medical school, you don't spend a lot of time at the school. You're off doing things at different places. So I don't remember discussing it at school.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you, as far as you know, did any of your classmates, other than Kathie, disappear in the middle of medical school training, never to be heard from again?
No, they didn't.
And in terms of something being memorable and kind of an unusual event, where would that kind of rate?
It would be very unusual.
So is it your belief that you found out about it in 1982 when Kathie would have graduated and didn't graduate, or do you think it would have been in '83?
I think it would have, I'm not sure because I really don't remember the year, but I would imagine it would have been when she was about to graduate.
I want to talk for a moment about rotations in medical students. First of all, in your 40-year career, do you still work with residents and occasionally with medical students?
I do.
And can you tell me, has the culture changed from the way it is today in terms of kind of medical students and even younger doctors in terms of how they approach the job versus what it was like for you coming up 40 years ago?
I think the people who are in medical school and residency and stuff are very devoted and they want to show up, but even more so back then, I think.
I don't want to get you in trouble with your current coworkers, but is it fair to say that the attitude 40 years ago, back then there was no 80-hour restriction, correct, on how much residents could work a week?
That's correct. You worked very, very hard.
Is there a restriction today?
There is.
In terms of your own experience, did you ever call in sick to a rotation?
To a rotation, never.
And can you tell me how sick would a medical student, I'm going from your experience, I want you to go back to when you were in medical school. How sick would you have had to be to call in sick to a rotation?
Very sick.
And have you ever described it in another way?
We used to joke that the only way to call in sick is if you were in cardiac arrest.
And you were sick one time, is that correct?
Not as a medical student, but I have called in sick once.
Were you ever sick as a medical student?
I never called in sick as a medical student.
And you're indicating by your memory you called in sick one time. That's over how long?
I probably called in sick more than once, but maybe twice, but
That's over,
very rare.
That's over 40 years?
38.
And can you tell me the one time that you remember you called in sick, what was your condition?
I had a broken rib and a collapsed lung.
And in terms of, was that something unusual about you, or was that the culture?
That was the culture.
I want to ask you, in terms of if somebody were going to call in sick to a rotation, the first day of that rotation, would you expect the call to come in before they were due to start?
Speculation.
Overruled.
Yes.
And can you tell me why?
So they could prepare. Medical students were needed. Their labor was necessary back then, especially back then.
Are you familiar with the pediatric ambulatory care rotation at Jacobi, or at, I can't remember if Jacobi or Bronx, the pediatric ambulatory care rotation that you took at Einstein was available as a medical student?
I don't remember taking it myself.
Do you know that, is it fair to say that most clinics would start at approximately 9 a.m.?
8, 9.
And I want you to assume the following hypothetical. I want you to assume that an individual is going to be starting their first day of a pediatric ambulatory clinic, and that they are due to be there at 9 o'clock. I want you to further assume that it is alleged that that medical student did not call in to report that they were going to be sick until between 9 and 11. Does that sound consistent with the culture that existed at Einstein Medical School in the late 70s, early 80s?
It's a little unusual unless somebody had gotten injured on the way in or something like that.
I want you to further assume that that individual called saying that they had a headache, diarrhea, and cramps. Does that sound like the level of illness that you would expect a medical student in the early 80s to be calling in with at that time?
It would be unusual. If it was severe diarrhea, you might not be able to work.
And I want to further ask you, in your experience, I want you to assume that Kathie Durst was very interested in doing a pediatric residency in the New York area. Are you understanding my hypothetical so far? And she is doing a pediatric ambulatory care rotation at Jacobi, a place that she might be applying to for residency. Are you following me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me, would you expect that in that position and situation, that she would have an extra incentive to impress the rotation, the individuals who are running it?
Absolutely.
And can you explain why that would be?
Because when you're applying for residency, your experience at the place is very, very important. People get to know you, get to see that you're responsible, so.
I want to ask you, as a fourth-year medical student, almost a physician, we're going to say that this happens in February. When you are going into a rotation, are you counted on to be a member of the team?
Yes.
And in that situation, I want you to assume, for as an example, that you were going to be sick for a rotation. Who would you call to indicate? Let's assume, for instance, you are supposed to be doing a pediatric acute clinic. Would you call the service that was handling the pediatric acute clinic, an intern, a resident, an attending physician, or would you call a dean at the medical school?
You'd probably call the site director or the secretary who handled the rotation.
Will you raise your voice, please?
Oh,
I'm not sure
again?
you can be heard 30 feet behind you.
Oh, me?
No, the attorney.
Sure. And in terms of making that call, apologize, I forgot where I was. One second.
I think you passed the witness.
Not quite. One moment, Your Honor. I'm sorry.
Who would she call? She called the site director.
Or would you call a dean of the medical staff, medical school?
Yes, I'm sorry. Would you expect that an individual who is going to be responsible for showing up to that clinic at approximately, as you said, 9 a.m., that if they were not going to end up making it to that rotation, that they would call up a dean at a medical school instead of the service that they're supposed to be reporting to?
I would think that would be unusual.
And when you say unusual, in your experience, can you even imagine a medical student not calling the rotation where they're supposed to go and instead calling a dean not associated with the rotation?
No.
And let me ask you, want to go a step further, if there was going to be a call, would a medical student, in your opinion, a female medical student, which you work, would they describe to a male dean that they, quote, had diarrhea, cramps, and a headache? Is that how you would expect a medical student to be speaking to a dean?
That is speculative. Speculation.
I can ask more questions if the court would like me to build the foundation. I think the witness is qualified to answer.
Yeah, I think she is. It's a little bit speculative, I suppose. But why don't you say knowing her?
Yeah, so what I'm asking is, you knew Kathie Durst, correct? Was that a yes?
Yes,
And you're aware, I assume, that she was a nurse prior to being a doctor?
yes, I was aware of that.
And the medical students and the nurses that you knew at that time, would you expect them to be, number one, reporting personal descriptions of their sickness to a male dean?
Again, it's speculative.
Oh,
I can answer that? I'm not sure. It's possible that they would. It depends on the person. But she seemed a very private person. Some people would be more willing to. So I'm not sure. I can't answer that.
Would you expect, in your experience, knowing Kathie, that she would have referred to her condition rather than saying, I have a gastrointestinal issue or I'm ill, of literally describing to an older man in a position of authority, I've got diarrhea, cramps, and a headache?
That's repetitious.
I'm not sure.
The last time that you had any contact with Kathie, do you remember when that was?
I don't remember.
Do you remember if you saw her after you got back from your leave of absence?
I don't remember the timing. I'm sorry.
Do you have a memory as you sit here, if you don't remember the timing, do you have any image of or memory of the last time you saw her?
The biggest image I have of her is the dark sunglasses in the cafeteria. That was my biggest memory of her.
And when you say the dark glasses, does that include the black eye as well?
Yes.
And if I were to ask on a scale of 1 to 100, with 1 being, I'm not sure if I saw that at all, and 100 being I'm absolutely certain, what would your answer be?
You said 100?
Yep.
100.
No further questions.
Mr. DeGuerin, you may cross-examine the witness.
I don't have a laptop, so I'm gonna be back here.
I like that better. Thank you, Mr. DeGuerin.
Okay, I don't know how to operate one.
I wouldn't brag.
Well, I'm a proud Luddite, Your Honor. Hi, Dr. Bloch. We've never met. I'm Dick DeGuerin, and I'm proud to represent Bob Durst. You might not think so, but I am. Where did Kathie live when you knew her?
She lived on the Upper West Side in the 70s.
I know a little bit about New York. Probably a lot of these people don't know about it. East 86th Street is not on the Upper West Side, is it?
When I would commute with her to school, she lived on the Upper West Side in the 70s.
Okay, in the 70s. Was that from Riverside Drive?
Yes,
Okay. Did you ever visit her in her home at Riverside Drive?
I did not.
You would pick her up in front, I suppose?
She would pick me up usually.
Okay. Did you ever, so we can orient people about New York City, East 86th Street is on the other side of Manhattan from Riverside Drive?
Yes,
Okay. She would pick you up or you would pick her up?
she would pick me up. I lived uptown.
Okay, and uptown is?
I lived 94th Street at the time, and I was on the way to school.
Okay. What did you drive at the time?
Excuse me?
What kind of car?
Did I drive?
Yeah,
I had a Rabbit,
Volkswagen Rabbit.
Volkswagen Rabbit.
And what kind of car did she drive?
She had a Mercedes.
A
if I
gold
remember
Mercedes.
correctly. That's what I remember.
You've described it as a big gold Mercedes sedan, haven't
Yeah.
you? Okay. Is that a little unusual for struggling medical student?
Oh, I didn't think she was struggling.
Yes, but most medical students seem to be struggling, aren't they? Working hard, not
Yes.
a lot of money. Is that right?
Some are, some aren't.
Okay. But she didn't. She had an apartment on Riverside Drive and a big gold Mercedes. Right?
As far as I remember, yes.
Okay. How long did I call it a carpool, how long did your ride sharing take place?
It wasn't all the time. It was intermittent. It wasn't every day for years.
And of course, we know you took off for about a year, from
Yes,
July of 80 to July of 81.
I think that's correct.
All right. This one time that you saw her with a black eye, had she made efforts to put makeup or something over to kind of hide the black eye?
I don't remember if she had makeup.
Okay. And can you give us your best guess whether that was before you took your year off or after you took your year off?
I don't remember.
So it could have been either one.
It's a long time ago.
Okay, I understand that. I'm not faulting you for that. I'm just asking you, it could have been either before or after?
Yes.
All right. Generally speaking, medical students don't know what another medical student's evaluations are. Is that right?
That's correct.
And generally speaking, one student might not know the grades or how they're graded. Another student is graded.
Actually, when I went to medical school, they listed the grades on a board.
Oh, okay. Well, you were aware then that Kathie had dropped out of a couple of her rotations?
I was not aware of that.
Did you check to see if she was doing okay or not?
I did not.
All right.
I looked at my own grades.
Do you remember that during your time at Einstein, there were several deans?
I didn't hear what you said.
Several, it's this thing. Do you remember that during your time at Einstein, there were several deans of the medical school?
I don't remember the deans. I didn't have much contact.
Do you remember that there was a dean named Dr. Jean, Jean Cook?
No.
Do you remember that the actual dean, Dr. Cook, was an assistant dean? You remember that there was another dean named Cooperman, Dean Cooperman?
Yes, I remember Dr. Cooperman.
Okay. Did you have a relationship with either Dr. Cook, the assistant dean for students, or Dean Cooperman?
I met him, but I didn't have a relationship with him.
Cooperman or Cook?
Cooperman.
Okay. Did you know that Kathie had a relationship, not saying anything
not.
other than friendship or knowledge, with Dr. Cook?
I did not.
I want to show you something that's part of the medical records, and I'll mark as Exhibit B, I believe. It's a personal note from Dean Cook.
Okay, defense B.
How do we do this? I can do it on the Elmo. There we go. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Correct. Record is B is 2 pages. The second page I'll show in a moment.
Thank you.
Can you read that?
I can read it.
Yes, I will. Can we see it there? You got to move it down a little bit. There it goes. The date is 9 March 1981. And you see that the letterhead is Jean, I believe that's pronounced Jean Cook, Assistant Dean for Students. Does that jog your memory at all?
No.
Okay. It's to Mrs. Kathleen Durst. You can see it's handwritten. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Dear Mrs. Durst, I understand from my office that things aren't going too smoothly for you right now. Would you like to talk to me? Do you think I can help? Sincerely, JLC. Did I read that correctly?
You did.
Now, during your tenure in the school, did you ever have a dean reach out to you to offer help?
No.
As his title illustrates, Assistant Dean for Students, it makes sense to you that if the Assistant Dean for Students thought Kathie Durst was having a tough time, he might reach out to her.
That's what deans are supposed to do. They're
Right.
supposed to help students.
Sure. By the way, were you aware of who the founders were of Einstein? I asked the question whether she was aware.
Well, it assumes by the founders.
Founders with an S on the end of it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you know who founded Albert Einstein?
No.
All right. So you did not know whether or not the Durst family were among the founders of Einstein? Ask the
That's
question.
correct. Sustained.
Okay. Now, let's look at the next page of Exhibit B. And if we can, draw it up a little bit. It's 10 March 1981, the next day. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
And it's from Dean Cook, Assistant Dean for Students, as it looks like his signature, and it's directed to the registrar. It says, Ms. Durst has withdrawn from the surgery clerkship for personal reasons effective today. See that?
Yes,
Did you ever withdraw from a clerkship?
I did not.
Not getting personal with your grades or anything like that, did you ever find the need to withdraw from a clerkship?
I did not.
Would you agree with me that these two memos show somewhat of a relationship between Kathleen Durst and Dean Cook?
I guess so.
Is this the first time you've seen this?
Seen this note?
These two notes, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, so to put it together, on the 9th of March, Dean Cook reaches out to her offering help. On the 10th of March, he tells the registrar she's going to withdraw from a surgery clerkship. Again, you have stated that it would be unusual, you didn't say it wouldn't happen, for a student to call the dean if a student was to miss a class or miss a clerkship or miss a, what's the other terminology? Rotation. You didn't say it wouldn't happen, right? You have to verbalize your answer.
Oh, I said it would be unusual, not that it wouldn't happen.
Not that it wouldn't happen. Would you agree that it would be more likely to happen if there was a relationship with the dean?
Possibly, but I don't know.
And you've also said that it would depend upon the student, it would depend on the person, whether they call the dean or the actual head of the clerkship or the head of the rotation, correct?
I don't think I said that. I said no, usually you would call the head of the rotation. I said it would be unusual, maybe, it depends on the person whether they describe their symptoms.
Okay, so it would depend on the person whether they felt comfortable to describe their symptoms, right?
Yes.
Were you aware that Kathie Durst was using cocaine in the last couple of years of her student?
I was not.
Was cocaine generally widely available in New York City
I
in
think
the early 80s?
I think it was available in the 80s.
You know some of the symptoms of a cocaine hangover.
Yes, as a physician, I do.
Can we leave that up, please? Some of the symptoms of a cocaine hangover include a headache, right?
Not usually. Usually people just are tired and they sleep a lot.
And some of the symptoms of a cocaine hangover could be diarrhea.
Not in my experience seeing people, but
Well, you're aware, of course, that cocaine was commonly cut or diluted with mannitol, aren't you?
yes, I am aware of that.
And mannitol is a baby laxative, isn't it?
It is.
So have you had experience that someone with cocaine hangover?
I have not seen anybody with those symptoms in the emergency department in my experience.
Or cramps?
I have not seen anybody in my experience.
Okay. But you're not saying it's not possible, are you?
Many things are possible.
My question is, you're not saying it's not possible, are you?
Wait a minute, there are too many knots in that. Can you rephrase the question, please?
You're not saying that it's impossible.
I'm not saying it's impossible.
When, and you don't remember when it was, but when you and others saw Kathie in the cafeteria with dark glasses and saw that she had a black eye, did you report that to anybody?
I did not.
Do you know if anybody else there reported it to anybody?
I don't think so.
You said that Kathie mentioned, well, I'm not with him right now, or something of that.
Yes,
At some later time, you were aware that they had got back together, right?
yes,
And were living together at the Riverside Drive apartment.
yes.
And I believe you said you never went to that apartment. Where you, generally speaking, Riverside Drive is one of the better areas of the West Side, isn't it?
Yes,
And a penthouse in a Riverside Drive apartment would be unusual for a medical student to live in a penthouse on Riverside Drive. Is that a fair statement?
unless the medical student had lots of money.
Or, of course. And you knew, or at least figured, that Kathie Durst had money because she drove a big gold Mercedes.
Yes,
So then, did you ever know Kathie to live at an apartment on East 86th Street?
I think I remember she did live on the east side. I didn't know which street.
Okay. Well, on the east side, that was, when you were aware that she lived on the east side, that was before she and Mr. Durst moved to the Riverside Drive apartment, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So, according to your knowledge and understanding that you didn't weren't real close to her, there was a period of time when she lived at Riverside, on the east side. Then they didn't live together. And after that, they lived together at the Riverside Drive apartment penthouse. Is that right?
Foundation regarding this witness's
Do you know the various places she lived over what period of time and in what sequence?
I know she lived in the 86th Street before she moved to the Upper West Side apartment. I don't remember when I saw the incident with her, where she was living at the time.
I'm sorry to take your question, but you may go ahead and
Okay, so
ask again.
let's summarize that. You do remember, or you have a recollection, that she first lived on the east side. I've suggested East 86th. And then there was a period of time when you believe they lived apart. And then there was a period of time after that when they lived on Riverside Drive on the Upper West Side, right?
I don't know what the sequence was. I don't know whether she was at the Upper West Side apartment when the incident happened or whether she was at the 86th Street apartment.
No,
I
I
have
wasn't
no
asking-
knowledge of the sequence of events then.
Okay, I wasn't asking you about when, in relationship to where she lived, the incident happened. I'm moved on because I understand you don't know whether it was before you left or after you left. But the sequence is all I'm asking about.
I don't know the sequence. I don't know. You are implying to me that she lived at 86th Street, they split up for a while, and correct me if I'm wrong, and then they moved to the 72nd Street. I don't know if that's true. I have no knowledge of that.
72nd Street.
Or whatever the 72nd or 79th, wherever
Upper
they were.
West Side.
Upper West Side. It was in the 70s,
Riverside Drive.
right, in the 70s.
Okay, I thought you had agreed with me. You thought that was generally the sequence of events.
She did live on the east side first, but I don't know if the incidents where she had a black eye happened in between that or whether she was at the 77th
Yes, and I'm not asking you about the
I
incident.
had misunderstood what you were saying.
No, I'm just asking you about your understanding, and we know it could be accurate or not, your understanding of whether that was a sequence, the sequence being first, East 86 or the east side, then living apart, and then back together on Riverside Drive.
See, I don't know if that's the sequence, that they were on 86th, then living apart, then 72nd. It could have been that they were at, I have no knowledge of that. She could have been at 72nd, left for a while, and then came back to
Okay,
the
we're
70s.
using different terms. I think we're talking about the same thing. You're saying 72nd, but so a lot of people here are not from New York City.
The Upper West Side apartment.
Upper West Side,
Yeah.
Riverside Drive.
Right. I don't know that they were living apart in between their move, or I have no knowledge of that.
Okay.
Break time? All right, Mr. DeGuerin, any more questions for this
No,
witness?
I think that's it. Thank you.
That's it? The redirect examination?
Oh, yes.
Then we'll take a break and return for the redirect examination.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, of course. So anyway, it is, let's get back at 3:30. Do not discuss your testimony with any other witness, and please return at 3:30. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, remember, don't talk about the case or about any of the people or any subject involved in it with anyone, including the other jurors. Don't make up your mind about the verdict or any issue until after you've discussed the case with the other jurors during deliberations.
I just remembered another question.
We'll start with you and then go back.